So if you're watching this video, not the podcast that you're hearing, I'm in the drawing studio at the U of S, and if you want to know more about that, you can check out the vlog this week because I came to Saskatoon and spent some time here. So I decided it'd be fun to revisit my alma mater and get a conversation in here as well as some vlog stuff. And what I wanted to talk about this week, which honestly, I was just thinking like, oh, it'd be really cool to have a conversation in the studio. I didn't even think about what I was going to talk about. And then I thought, oh, here's something I could talk about. And it's related to being in the art studio, the drawing studio. Although we did have some painting classes in here, but that's also because they were like we didn't do any physical painting in here. It was, critiques and stuff. Anyway, I thought I would talk about being an artist. I guess having an artist's identity, or like what does that mean? And I don't know how much I'm going to be able to get out of this because I just thought of like, there's this quote that Marilyn Manson had where he said being an artist is like the last respectable thing you could call yourself. And at the time, I mean, this was years ago, but at that time, I was like, that's kind of hokey. Like, this was probably mid-2000s when I heard it in high school, or maybe right after that. And it was like, that's kind of hokey. And that was before I would have ever identified myself as an artist at all. And I just thought, like, yeah, it's a little cheesy. Like, it just doesn't feel good. But if I tried to think about it, I'm like, I guess I kind of like, no. And then I was just like, no, I can't. Like, I don't know. I can't do it. And I mean, I usually try to like let you know who I'm quoting just because it's the right thing to do. But specifically in this case, it was just like Marilyn Manson said it. So look where he is now. And I don't necessarily mean all the controversy that's been going on and the he said, she said, or the accusations or the whatever else. But also just like artistically where he's been at. And if you know his career and his discography and the other things he's been doing, then I mean, you've got your own feelings about that. But anyway, it's just one of those things that like, I don't know, like it's just such a weird, I don't know, it's a very puffed up thing to say. Like, I'm an artist, and just like being like, that's the last respectable thing you could call yourself. It's like, but no, because the segue was that someone's going to ruin it, right? Like, I'm not saying Marilyn Manson ruined the term being an artist. It's just funny that he said it, and it was so short-sighted just to say it. And then again, maybe the quote was taken out of a certain context of a bigger paragraph or something, and I don't know the rest of it. But it just seems like something he would say, and it's a silly thing to say in that, like, by itself. Yeah, silly. Because someone's going to ruin it. You can't make a blanket statement like, that's like saying ACAB, or the reverse of that. It's like saying, like, oh, all military people are awesome, or like, all gay people are great, or like, no, like, people are human, and when you put them into a category, you can't, unless the category is good people, then good people fit into the category of good people, but not every Christian is a great person, not every cop is horrible, not every, whatever, is just doesn't make you a good person to be under some label. So it's just saying, like, an artist is the last respectable thing you can call yourself. It's like, well, what does that mean? If I say I'm an artist, what do people think of right away? What associations do they make? And part of that has to do with defining art, which I'm not going to really get into that much today because I've done it a lot in a lot of different ways, and mostly through like art podcast stuff, whether through Artist Life or Art Ballad. You can check those podcasts out. The RSS feeds are still active as far as I know, and whatever. Anyway, but I've talked about defining art before, and it's still something that I struggle with, which is a good thing. I think every artist should really get to reevaluate. I mean, they should reevaluate what that is for a while. And maybe there's a point where I think where I'm getting to right now is maybe you just give up trying to define it. You just give up on that and be like, yeah, I just, art's whatever, man. And I completely understand. Like, there's some things that, it's amazing. And I don't know if this is old age or what, or maturing or whatever, but there's just like, I found it to be a really worthy pursuit to explore what art was as an artist and to question yourself about what do you value in art, what is it to you, um, how do you define it, because how you define it could be, if you're defining it, you're talking about um, what you value and what you don't in art, and what matters and what doesn't, and what are you excluding and what are you including in that definition is one of the big things I say a lot. So it's interesting to me to do that as a practice, to and I, to the extent of like define art in one sentence, like give it a definition, and by doing that in a succinct way, you are including and excluding things with other words that you use. Like if art is supposed to be something passionate, then anything outside of that isn't art. So if it's mechanical or if it's without compromise or whatever, like you've got all these things that are like, okay, well that ceases to be art now because I said art has to be this and art has to be this. So, but I'm just thinking like, man, there's some people that are like, yeah, I just don't spend time doing that. And I'm starting to get it. Like for the first time, I'm starting to get it because I think, and maybe again, that's like what's the quote? It's from the movie Quills, and I don't remember the name of the actor. I want to say his first name's John. Oh man, I can't remember now. Ideals or Youth's Final Luxury, I think. John Cain, is that an actor? Michael Caine plays someone in Quills, and he says, ideals, youth, or idealism, youth's final luxury, something like that. Anyway, it just reminded me of that. So, sorry for the tangent. No, I'm not sorry. That's just me. Anyway, it's just interesting of just like thinking like, I thought it was a really worthwhile pursuit, and then a lot of people weren't doing it then, and maybe that's why I thought it was so worthwhile, as like, and maybe that's the thing, is like, I, at the time, was thinking like, no, like, doing this is really good. This is a really good thing to do, and everyone should do this, and I maybe look down at people who weren't doing this practice, but maybe they were more evolved than I was, and they were ready for the fact, like, it doesn't matter. Why does it matter what art is or what isn't, or why I'm calling, like, what I'm calling art and what I'm not? Like, it doesn't matter. And I still think it's valuable, especially if you're younger. I think it's really valuable. I do this practice with high school students when I teach them art, that like, you know, what is art to you? What does it include? What does it exclude? You need to think about these things because you've been told what art is most likely your entire life and haven't been asked. And if you are going to be an artist or someone who creates art or whatever that's a thing. Are you an artist? So many students are like, I'm not an artist, I just like doodle. It's like, okay, but that's art. Like, so if you're creating art, are you an artist? You know, aren't you? Like, if you're creating art and if you say, oh, it's just a doodle, it's not art, then, well, what is art then? Why are you telling me it's not art? So I think that I define myself as an artist all the time. Like, it's one of the first, if someone says, like, how would you define yourself? I'd say creative and passionate. Those are two words that I've just been, like, I've trained myself to use for a long time. Like, how do you describe yourself? And that's how I would. And they mean a lot of things. And, like, but I use the word creative instead of artistic. And that's interesting to me. You know, I'm going to look it up right now in real time because I'm just throwing this out there now. It's just coming out now. This is what's supposed to happen in a conversation. But I just didn't really think about it before. So, I mean, the definition of creative would be marked by the ability or power to create, having the quality of something created rather than imitated. One who is creative, one involved in the creation of things, creative activity. So, creative, you know, the ability or power to create. And if we say artistic, of or relating to characteristic of art or artists. Showing imaginative skill in arrangement or execution. And so I guess this makes sense. I say I am creative and passionate. Maybe I should switch that to artistic and passionate. Creative just sounds more broad, and I guess that's why I used it. However, artistic is more of what I guess I mean, because creating could be really mechanical. And I'm not to take away from anyone's work, but I mean, like, a carpenter could be incredibly artistic and creative. I think when we use creative colloquially, we're thinking about art, but you can create stuff that I would not call art, right? Like, you can create things, you could create a piece of paper from it. Like, it could be a very mechanical, formulaic, factory, assembly line process to create a product, right? It doesn't have to be artistic, but I think we use those interchangeably sometimes. And now, I mean, I'm glad I had this conversation so that I can start to think about, maybe I'd rather describe myself as artistic and passionate. It just doesn't roll off the tongue as well as creative and passionate. But yeah, or being an artist, I forgot what that definition of artistic was already, but something there stood out to me as being different from creative that I really liked, and it was showing imaginative skill in arrangement or execution. So, imaginative skill. If I am being artistic, it's different than just creating, the act of creating a thing. Being creative could be just creating a thing, not the imaginative part. I think we usually think of someone being creative being like imaginative, because you can be creative, but you could just be creating something, and that doesn't necessarily take any imagination to create something, because someone could just tell you how to do a thing and you just do it. And again, it can be a very formulaic process. So it's interesting. I like that distinction, and I've never really looked into it before. I like to call myself an artist. Like I said, it's kind of one of the first things that I talk about, or that comes up in a conversation or something. Is like, I'm an artist. That doesn't, it defines me more than my career. So if I were in art, if I had a contract right now and I was an art teacher, if someone said, what do you do? I would assume they're talking about my career, but I'd still probably say I'm an artist, because that encapsulates more of what I do on a day-to-day basis than my career. And if my career wasn't art-related, if let's just say I was, if I was an English teacher, and I think that reading is still, or writing is an art, but whatever. If I was a mechanic, but I also happen to be an artist, someone said, what do you do? I would say, I'm an artist. And then I would go into whatever, and then I would say, but I make money as a mechanic, or like, that's my career, or whatever. But I'm an artist, and I like saying that. I like saying it because it feels more true to who I am, and just like how I would define myself based off of like the things that I enjoy, my artistic practice. Like, just my life revolves around things that I call my artistic practice, because I believe reading and writing and reflecting are all part of my artistic practice, not just the time spent on creating a thing, because that's it's like the tip of the iceberg thing. It's like those diagrams you see where like the iceberg that's floating on top of the ocean is like 20%, and the 80% of other stuff is underneath it that you can't see under the water. And to me, my artistic practice is like, here's the like 30% or whatever you see, which is the actual thing that I created, and here's the other part of the practice. Yeah, maybe 30-70 is better of a split, or maybe 35-65. I don't know. Anyway, but the majority is like underneath. It's doing all this other stuff that I need. I need to, to be able to read, to be able to have time of peace to reflect. I need to be able to. Sometimes that's just listening to music and doing nothing else, which is incredibly rare that I give myself time to do that. But part of it is mindfulness stuff, or just whatever, like giving and reading stuff and consuming media, because that informs my art. That informs me as a person, and I get to take stuff in and then decide. Or like it influences me in a way. Oh man, I just actually put this up on my Instagram today. Inspired by, not influenced by. And I really like that distinction. But it inspires me in a certain way to maybe think about something and then want to produce something that might be, like I just have thoughts, right? Like I just and feelings, and I want to express them. And something inspires me to think more about them, or to express them in a certain way, or combine elements, or whatever. Anyway, I like defining myself as an artist. I think that definition of artistic is better than the one that is a better descriptor than the definition of creative. I guess that colloquially, like contemporary times, the way we use them is almost interchangeable, but I like that distinction, and going back to the source of those words from Merriam-Webster's dictionary. I don't really know what else to say. I'm glad that I had this conversation. I can explore those distinctions further and maybe decide I want to present myself more. But that's that thing. So I want to go back to this other thing of like, being an artist doesn't have to be capital A, formal, and like, looking down on people with your nose up in the air type thing. But that is elitist. That's the word I was going to say. Is that like I was very elitist in my university days and thinking everything had to be so serious. And in the last couple of years, I've really had more fun with art or creating stuff. I've had more fun with it, and I've thought less about defining art. I've opened myself up to still saying, like, sometimes, because I still use my old definition of art, that I'm like, I'm not doing art right now, I'm just doing design work. And I'm okay doing more design work than I used to be. Like, concepts to me aren't as big anymore. I still have them, but maybe it's because I've been exploring them here so much, rather than visually, or in writing more than I used to a couple of years ago, that I'm exploring them there so they're not coming out visually as much. Or just because I want to have fun making stuff without any heavy whatever. And maybe there's a part of me that kind of misses that seriousness, but I'm also very, like, I could cringe looking at myself sometimes in the past, but like, it's just, I don't know. Again, if the definition of art changes for me, and if I'm challenging that as a practice, over time, then maybe the definition of an artist does too. But I still consider myself an artist, and I still like that label. And I would never say, "Oh, it's the only respectable thing you can call yourself." Like, that's silly. But I do like saying it. I think that there's certain things that come with that, and it's not like sometimes you just like the idea of something more than you actually like that thing. It's like someone being like, "I like the idea of going to the gym a lot," and I'm going to say that I'm like a gym goer. But really, you don't like going to the gym. You just like the idea of being someone or being perceived as someone who goes to the gym. And it's like, no, like I'm an artist. I create art. I make art. I love art. I live and breathe art. Like it's such a focus of my life. Like it's, and I believe that it is a respectable thing. I wouldn't say it's the only respectable thing left to call yourself, but I do believe introspection is something that is incredibly important, and I think an artist has to have that. I think there is still an element of conceptuality. There's still an element that needs to be there to be a valid artist in my eyes, of like someone who is intellectual, reflective, and wants to do better and like think about things. Like there's a certain amount of intellect that I believe an artist would need to have to be considered an artist, and I guess that is the biggest thing that I like about saying I'm an artist. I hope that comes across to people that like. It's like when someone says, "Are you a painter?" because they see that I'm wearing a paint shirt, which today I'm not, but they ask if I'm a painter, and I'm like, "Do you mean an artist, or do you mean like a house painter?" Like, I don't know what you mean, because sometimes people mean like an artist, and I just say I'm an artist, and it always sounds like a little like pretentious, I guess, but it's like an important distinction to me. And the thing is that to me, that's like, it's like saying, "Oh, but man, it's so hard to just say something sometimes that you mean, and you want it to come across that way, but you don't want it to come across as like pretentious." Like, I'm a poet. Like a poet has like a certain seriousness that I think denotes like you reflect on stuff, like you think about things, you feel things. But to me, that's what an artist is. I reflect on my feelings. I feel things. I reflect on them. I think about them. It's not just, I pour a bunch of paint on something and never think about it and walk away and like I just make stuff. Like, no, I don't just make stuff. What I do is I'm trying to think of another word. I process my internalness and express it outwardly. And the things that I get internal feelings from my my experiences that my being interacts with the outside world and other people, and then it comes back here. It's just this continual cycle, right? Anyway, with that's me talking about being an artist, identifying an artist, and I don't know if it helped anyone understand me or made things more confusing, but I think it makes you understand me better, and I understand myself better, more importantly. So with that, we'll see you on another time.